Good morning, everyone. On behalf of Center for Folklore Studies and Research, CFSR, and Center for Folk Culture Studies, CFCS, University of Hyderabad, I, Shita Bose, Executive Member of Center for Folklore Studies and Research, welcome you all in this second online Young Folklorist Conference 2025. CFSR has started this conference as a part of its commitment towards the preservation and restoration and revival of the folk cultures, as well as to spread awareness in both the academic and non-academic sphere. This three-day conference brings together the young and bright minds from all over the world associated with folklore and culture studies from all the disciplines, where the folk artists, performers, filmmakers, and academicians to not only work on restoration and revival, but to encourage, ignite, and inspire. This year's theme of the conference is Sustaining the Folk and Introspection into Preserving and Reviving the Lords for Future. I assure with confidence that throughout these 3 days, we will together embark on an explorative and fascinating journey towards the dynamic world of folklore studies. We are lucky to have Professor Joly Puthussery, Associate Professor, Center for Folk Culture Studies, University of Hyderabad, with us now. As the doyen of folklore and culture studies, Professor Puthussery has completed his doctorate from University of Hyderabad, and since then he is working tirelessly in the preservation and revival of Indian folklore in both academic and non-academic sphere. We are privileged enough to have you, sir, the backbone of this year's Young Folklorist Conference, and without your consistent and tireless efforts, this conference could not have taken place. This time, I would request you, sir, on behalf of the organizers, to deliver the formal welcome speech and welcome the audience today. Thank you.
Good morning, all. Thank you, Rusha. And thank you, the CFSR team, for gregariously collaborating with a very small team of Center for Folk Culture Studies, University of Hyderabad, for such a, I will say, humongous event. And quite a lot of people has lent their hand, in helping us in making this possible. So I thank and welcome all of you. Before going into a smaller note, interestingly, I have to say, after visualizing this conference, CFSR and CFCS team had many formal, informal conversations, multiple contexts, which cut across the mono, multi, and digital medialities. So, our folklore concept flourished through Dan Benmonian idea of folklore. Here I'm saying always, as artistic communication in small groups. So I just added always, wherever we had the communication, that, that small group which communicated without or truly beyond the clutches of mediality and temporality at many parts, made us believe that folklore is everywhere, as a data, as a thing of study, or a science. It needs approaches and applications to sustain. Anyone with an aptitude can endure this particular phenomena. One need to look, if you really wanted to understand folklore, one need to look what I say, do, make, believe, or what I believe, what I make, and how do I behave to become one among many. So with these one among many also makes us to think, understand, and realize the similarities and differences, which subsumed over a period of time and submerged to conceive and construct the communities. So CFSR and CFCS could construct a very healthy small communities to undertake such kind of an act, and kudos to Imtiaz Ali and team. Then we understood in due course of time, we are the folk, and we can say we are the world, and these are our laws which blinds, blends, and bestows us to be one whole. So as part of the folklore, folk culture studies, or to do folkloristics as part of our academic, social, and folk life, and our function is to preserve and sustain the laws sans perishing. Imtiaz Ali and CFSR opened up the vistas of possibilities for us to be part. So we know that in a short, in Samantha Bonner's words, we can say we have to publicize, we have to purpose, we have to politicize, or we have to legalize the folklore, be it a data, be it an objective study, be it a whatever it is, be it part of our mindful life. So from that four major categories, we are now taking up the two categories. That one is to publicize, the other is to purposing. To publicize folklore is nothing but after collection classification, we embark upon a journey to disseminate. So publicizing folklore in the present days are the acts of curatorial ventures. So be it cultural expression, be it data, be it academic interpretations, these are all different kinds of approaches by us to make sure folklore is made known to many. That is our purpose. So that when I talk about the purpose, I can simply say, I can simply quote the Michael Owen Jones words, putting folklore to use. He has expanded the idea of applied folklore from the use of education, medicine, and creative industries to new occupations in organizational behavior, economic development, law and governmental agencies, regional planning, social work, etc., etc. So Michael J. Owens is making us to that how can we put folklore into use of in the multiple terrains. That is giving us freedom. And we are sure every folklore, every lore has its politics within. So in a country like us, in a country with diversities and expressiveness, and I don't know, it's an amazing country. There are a lot of possibilities in future to pitch in and legalize folklore to construct a world which can be, very much constructed. So that's what is our humble attempt in this regard. I extend my heartful thanks to all the people, and I always try to say this particular, I always try to, look at the Barrett Olakin's word, folklore structures the world view through which a person is educated into the language and logic systems of these closed societies. So folklore is an approach. It makes you to approach, interpret, and analyze the community's worldview, which makes you to understand the ready formulas, expressions, cultural norms, etc., 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 to empower, educate, elucidate, and explain, elaborate through exploration of cultural expressions of various kinds, and of course, to entertain. our simple attempt here, this seminar will definitely entertain. That's why Imtiaz brought music, film, cultural stands, etc., etc., etc. So I thank once again all of you, and I'm so happy to say that CFSR and CFCS is empowered to be part of this community, entertained to be part of with all of you to create an identity of folkloristics. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir, for such a wonderful welcome address. I hope the audiences has already charged enough to experience a wonderful day full of folklore studies. Now, I request both the faculty coordinators of this conference, Dr. Pooja Negi, Executive Member of CFSR and Assistant Professor, Department of English, Delhi University, and Dr. Nijil, Assistant Professor, Center for Folk Culture Studies, University of Hyderabad, to introduce our audiences briefly with the conference along with the organizations working for it. Handing over to Dr. Nijil and Dr. Pooja.
Am I audible, Pooja?
Yes, you're audible.
Yes, ma'am, you are.
So I'll begin. Good morning to all. I'm Dr. Pooja Negi, Assistant Professor in the Department of English at University of Delhi and Executive Member of the Center for the Folklore Studies and Research. On behalf of CFSR and the Center for Folk Culture Studies, University of Hyderabad, I welcome you all to the second International Young Folkloristic Conference on Sustaining the Folk and Introspection into the Preserving and Reviving the Lords for the Future, which is scheduled from March 28 to 30th, 2025. I am pleased to share that this conference builds upon the first International Young Folklorist Conference on Transition, Transformation in South Asian Folklore, Problems, Perspective, Prospect, which CFSR was organized from March 29 to 31st, 2024. So this conference somewhere represents a progression concentrating on the preservation of the folk tradition, and it serves as a reflection on maintaining and revitalizing the culture narratives for future generations. As we see, the broad theme of conference is to highlight the importance of folklore in understanding human knowledge and sustainability. So the focus is on the integrating sustainable practices within the folklore to protect cultural identities in a rapidly modernizing world. The key points of the conference that includes the role of folklore in shaping the cultural identity and the urgency to protect it against the modernization, and to explore the innovative preservation and method for the folklore future. The potential outcome of the conference could be to raise awareness of the importance of folklore and the cultural identity in the communities, and also engage with new approaches that might lead to the development of innovative methods for preserving and reviving folklore. This conference will help to build stronger connection between scholars, artisans, community members, and working in the folklore studies. Overall, the conference envisages to integrate sustainable practices into folklore studies and explore innovative ways to preserve and revive folklore, fostering the connection among across the generation. Regarding the conference, we are happy to announce that we received over 200 abstracts, from which we have shortlisted close to 100 abstracts. These abstracts we received from various disciplines, such as anthropology, history, sociology, linguistic, literature, among others, that highlights the interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary nature of folklore. Folklore as a field of study has been evolving, and it needs to be examined in the methodological framework of various other disciplines. Hence, the current emphasis on the interdisciplinary approach has become an advantage for the folklore studies and providing the greater opportunity to explore the folklore from multiple perspectives, along with the recognizing and foregrounding the discipline of the dynamics of the field of the folklore. This conference will feature a diverse range of sessions over 3 days, beginning with an inaugural session led by retired Professor Satyanath from MI Department, University of Delhi. In addition, we have invited 7 distinguished keynote speakers from both India and abroad. The conference schedule includes a total 9 sessions across all 3 days, with breaks after 3 sessions each day. The session will explore a broad array of topics related to folklore, such as folk identity, urban folklore, culinary sustainability, and the relevance of the folklore in the 21st century. We are also pleased to welcome all three artisans from South Asian, particularly the nation in Indian subcontinent, Bangladesh, India, and Pakistan. The renowned folk singer Sauratuni from India will also contribute to this enriching experience. We really look forward to exploring the sustainable and interest in preserving our cultural heritage. Over the next 3 days, we will discuss the different genre of folklore and its sustainable practices for the future generation with a lineup of the speakers, presenters, panelists, and folk artists. Let's make this conference an enriching experience. Thank you all. Now I invite the faculty coordinator Nijil to continue the introductory part and request the Dr. Rusa to take over the next session. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning to everyone. As a part of welcome speech, Professor Joly Puthussery also mentioned that this one is humongous. This one is a huge academic and nearly 100 purpose presentation. It is the 6 panel sections in different various the field, and the academic and artistic field, and 8 keynote others, special keynote others from the different part of world. The speakers, scholars are involving with the mainly 4 foreign speakers are involved: Martha, Lisa, and Awaman, and Uttara, that are from the various part of the world. Too many presentation also involving this. And this conference is aimed to explore the innovative approach of sustaining folklore, focus on the theme of preservation and reviving the cultural heritage, aiming to external challenges, ethical consideration, and the various keynote sections. And within a time limit, I welcome all support of the CFSR and CFCS, and welcome all participants, and the professors are ready to join this conference. Okay, thank you.
Thank you both the coordinator for such a precise introduction to this conference. I feel glad to announce that we have with us Professor Satyanath, retired professor, Department of Modern Indian Languages and Literary Studies, University of Delhi, as the chief guest of Young Folklorist Conference 2025. Last year too, we were fortunate enough to host Sir as the keynote speaker, but this time we feel proud to host Sir as the chief guest of this conference. Satyanath Sir himself is an institution of culture studies and probably have embarked our academic journey into the world of culture studies by reading his writings during our MA classes. Sir, I request you to formally inaugurate the session with your profound words of wisdom. Handing over to Professor Satyanath.
Thank you very much. I declare the conference has started. Okay. Before starting my before saying few words, I would like to thank the organizers, CFSR and Center for Folk Center Studies, an young group of folklore researchers, and a university, a postgraduate department of one of the reputed universities of India, coming together to start or to host the youngest groups conference. You know, I attended Indian Folklore Society's conferences, which Handu used to organize for a very long time, and in the last 6-7 years, there is no such conference. But we have now a young group of researchers getting together to talk about folklore, which is a very, very welcome sign and also very refreshing. I thank all of you for having called me to give the inaugural words. And I will speak for about 20-25 minutes on the theme of the conference. I would like to ponder on the three words that you have used: sustaining, preserving, and reviving folk. I have there is a brief outline. Initially, I would like to look at the terms sustainability, preserving, and reviving. Then I will look at the ontology of the term folklore and several other disciplines which emerged during the same period. Then I'll briefly review folklore and try to understand what it did. As a sort of a sustaining or reviving or whatever it is, I would like to introduce you to three concepts. Some of them I myself did it, and it's a practice. Although I did comparative literature all the time, but folklore, visuality, cultural studies, they were never out of neither my purview nor the students who worked with me. Although they came initially with different ideas of comparing two texts, I slowly persuaded them and took them towards intermediality and comparative studies. Also, I tried to collaborate among my students so that they knew each other's work and also learned from that. In the end, towards the end, although all these things might look very positive and attractive, towards the end there is something that bothers me. The dominant of the discourses about which I talk, and I will end it with a note, but the note might look to you a bit pessimistic. But forgive me for that. That should actually give you enough courage and energy to ward off my pessimism. Sustaining, preserving, and reviving. Sustainability means conserving the use of resources such as habits, raw materials, energy, or human labor. Humanity should use these resources in such a way that they can be maintained over a long period of time rather than being depleted. This definition is fine for ecosystems. However, folklore that came under intangible cultural heritage, something that cannot be perceived by touch or by no physical substance resources, may not fit in perfectly well with the definition. However, the key idea here is being mindful of future generations, which is why sustainability is sometimes gets linked to preservation and revival. Sustainability is an assurance of preserving for future generations that subsumes future viability and intergenerational equity. Reviving, for me, is to bring something back to life, health, existence, or use, or to make something strong, active, and healthy again. Sustainability, preserving, and reviving are terms that were used in the context of ecosystems, involving scientific and technological intervention strategies, and I'm not sure that humanities and social sciences can follow that trajectory. Terms like literature, comparative literature, world literature, and folklore have a complex and continually evolving history. The earliest use of the term literature goes back to the 15th century. It evolved from the Latin literatura, meaning writing, grammar, and learning, and not literature as we use it today. The first recorded use of comparative literature is in French in 1816, and its first use in English is in 1857 by Matthew Arnold. So 1815, 1857. Similarly, world literature was used for the first time in 1827 by Goethe, as all of you know. to referring to the increasing circulation of literatures beyond national boundaries within the context of print culture and translation. The term folklore was first used in 1846 by William Thoms, though its German equivalents used by Grimm brothers dates back to 1812. Hence, the emergence of terms and their discussion took place in Europe within a span of 15 years, 1812 to 46. During the early part of the 19th century, it is interesting to note that it is during the 19th century that the nation states also came into existence in Europe. The birth of folklore and literary studies has been generally believed to be an outcome of European expansionism, colonization, and enlightenment, which not only privileged Europe, but also marginalized and denigrated Asian cultures. Despite data from Asia was extensively used in understanding the world around, the importance given to Asia is marginal. Let's look what happened in folklore and its development. It could be perceived broadly in three stages. A 19th century development, which is basically a collection. This is the folklore of a group. As the folklore of the group reinforced its sense of ethnic identity, that it was used for struggles of political independence and national unity. So it's sort of a nationalism, identity crisis linked sort of a folklore activity. I mean, I'm afraid that even today, many Indian folk languages folklore hasn't come out of that. In the first half of 20th century, structuralist and formalistic paradigms dominated. Basically, a taxonomic sort of data, the motif index and a lot of such studies, which eventually led to what we call in folklore as historical geographical method. Its main intention was to study distribution patterns and reconstruct the original forms. This original forms the word doesn't it look like textual criticism, monoculture, monotext, and a variety of other things that literature did. Second half of the 20th century attempted at redefining a series of folk as any group expressed its inner cohesion by maintaining shared tradition. There was a shift from rural to urban, from the past to the present, from the origin to the meaning and function. That means instead of worrying about origins to meaning and function, performativity and context, a lot of new things appear. Anyhow, Asia, South Asia remained conspicuously absent in this development of theory and methodology. Folklore studies in India inherited several conceptual and theoretical problems from the European and American models outlined above. In brief, mutually exclusive binary opposition, a totalizing taxonomy, and overgeneralization through structuralist and formalistic approaches without looking into social epistemologies are some of the conspicuous problems that folklore studies in India had to negotiate. It's starting from Blackburn and Ramanujan's volume, Another Harmony, New Essays on the Folklore of India, and Arjuna Padarai, Frank Horam, and Margaret Mills' volume on Gender and Power in South Asian Performing Traditions, that we start seeing South Asian perspectives in the study of folklore. The situation has changed to some extent. A highly influential, in order to understand folklore from a different perspective, or from the theory, or to escape from the theory that we have been pointing out here, a highly influential concept, world systems, that reflect the process of modern globalization, has been formulated, the ways of thinking about relationships between Europe and post-colonial nations. from a hierarchical perspective. The idea of world systems approach proposed by Immanuel Wallerstein, the modern world system, capitalist agriculture and the origins of the European world economy in the 16th century, privileges the European expansionism as the harbinger of enlightenment and modernism and marginalizes the role that Asia played during the pre-colonial period. Janet Abu-Lughod in 1989, before European hegemony, the world system, AD 1250-1350, questioned such an European superiority by asserting that the 13th and the 14th centuries saw the first modern world system. Abu-Lughod even cast doubt on the notion that the world system characteristics only developed in Europe in the 16th century due to its internal inventiveness and the virtues of its unique entrepreneurial spirit. This opens up the possibility of multiple world systems and globalizations even from the pre-colonial times. Pleas for such multiple world systems have also been put forward by others. They argued to posit at least 8 world systems, several of them earlier to the modern one. The Afro-Eurasian world system, which was initiated by the settled agrarian communities along the Nile Delta in Egypt, that subsequently led to the growth of a trade network and eventually resulted in a uniform social development and material culture. Through a further fine-tuning, Krinin and Korotayev suggest a phase of continental links spanning from 490 BCE to 492 CE, which was characterized by the rise of empires and first developed states with a final phase of the agrarian production principle. This roughly corresponds to the Silk Roads. It is pertinent here to remember that while Eurocentrism and its hegemonic discourses has treated Central Asia, South Asia, East Asia, and Middle East as peripheral to the modern world system, its position and role is radically different in pre-colonial world systems. Hence, the marginality of the contemporary Asian folklore and literary studies need not have to be the same during the pre-colonial period. This is in the sense, the Western discourses are dominating studies here. On the other hand, Asia during the pre-colonial period was dominant both economically and culturally and deserves to be understood appropriately. Discussing the intimate connection between the language and nations during the 19th century, Trotman, in his Languages and Nations, the Dravidian Proof in Colonial Madras, points out that the mosaic ethnology, classifying the people based on the book of Genesis from Bible, attributed to Moses, was transformed into a framework in linguistic sciences for classifying languages. This subsequently led to the concept of Indo-European family that was identified as Japhetic, subsuming European descendants. Trotman further says, the theory deadness of antiquity under the ideology of modernism, the theory deadness of Asia under Eurocentrism, and the theory deadness of the pre-colonial under the post-colonial theory converge to hide the aliveness of ancient Indian phonological analysis in the present. That is, he is talking of the grammar, ancient Indian grammar. We can see the Silk Road as a part of the world system, facilitated circulation of a variety of things: trade, religion, disease, and culture. Mayer, in his Painting and Performance, Picture Recital and its Indian Genesis, posits an alternative trajectory and traces the global development of picture showman tradition, what we call patuas, bhopas, and other things. Over 1,000 years of a genre of popular Buddhist folk literature, by pointing out that the early vernacular Chinese literature, conspicuous by its absence of animal tales, appear to have incorporated not only the animal-centered stories, but also its prosymmetric format, which is called Bian Wan in Chinese, which means a mixture of prose and verse. And in Sanskrit, it is called as Champu, due to the impact of picture showman traditions of India. His suggestion is that the performers traveled along with the merchants to perform, and this disseminated into the Chinese culture. It is a literary form. I will skip the details. Then I will if you have more time, I would like to do a bit a little more here. The Bian Wan is a literary form that is believed to be some of the earliest examples of vernacular and prosymmetric narratives in Chinese literature from the period of Tang Dynasty, 618 to 907, and the 5 dynasties, 970 to 960. See, the research that he has done reveals that there were visual pictures, with the pictures were shown, and on the back of these texts were there. So they would use it. And his suggestion was that as merchant caravans traveled, these performers performing the Buddhist tales, Jataka tales most probably, traveled along with them. This first diffused into the popular culture, or what we can also call it folklore, and subsequently precipitated into the classical literature, or what we call vernacular literature. So it's a movement from bottom to top. The most interesting issue is that they also have a lot of animal tales, which is not a characteristic of ancient Chinese literature. So his suggestion is most probably the animal tales, like the Panchatantra stories, traveled to the Buddhist Jataka stories in the Indian version. They were performed, hence they became popular in the Chinese popular tradition, and they moved into the Chinese literary tradition, where animal stories are conspicuously absent. So we are seeing now a world system and how folklore moves in. It gets a comparative dimension. There is a circulation of ideas, a variety of other things, which is very essential for us to discuss the next section. This is the third section, which I have called. It's very brief. I'm going to end pretty soon. Intermediality, dense archive, and comparative approach. Instead of using a binary categorization and a text or a distinction like written versus oral, for a very long time folklore is oral, or textual versus visual, we can use a threefold classification. This is not an opposition. We can look at textuality, whether it's oral or in print, sonority, and visuality, and bring in visual intermediarity into the discussion of folklore studies. Somewhere else, I have done some work on this, and I have designated them as scriptocentric, that means centered around script writing systems, phonocentric, orality, and the body-centric, which is visuality and performativity systems of representations. In the 1990s, witnessed a very radical shift in the paradigm, in the research paradigm of humanities and social sciences. And also, coming to orality, there is plenty of discussion on orality, whether the Rigvedic texts were oral or written, or they were written and transmitted in the oral tradition. And orality was rated as inferior. Wang even said the written text or script actually provides certain cognitive advantages to the community. So there is a lot of discussion on that. I will not go into the details. In the 1990s, moving away from the textual bias, in humanities, particularly in literature and humanities, then an intermediate term appeared, where they brought in intermediality. And also the same period witnessed the spatial term. This, I believe this happened consequent to the entry of computers into humanities, and the coming up of the internet and the World Wide Web, which started providing archives of unimaginable nature. So basically, what we ended up during this period was textuality was still remained, but it was contested by bringing musicality and to visuality of into the classrooms. I myself remember, the first time I was able to use computer in Delhi University was after the email was available to us. This is in the early 2000. I got a grant for some work which I did and I bought a computer from that. I had one right from 1986, Macintosh, which I had brought from US. But this, the internet and the World Wide Web made the teaching entirely different. I can bring in the various recitations. For teaching a course on Bhakti, I was able to bring in the Vedic recitation, the Buddhist chants from Tibetan, the singers who sing bhajans, abhangs, and the kirtans in different Indian languages into the classroom. And also, its visuality. This provided actually remarkable change in the texture of the class itself. And so, hence, many of my students, they were all trained in the Department of English in Delhi University. But when I came to work in Department of Modern Indian Languages for their MPhil and PhD, they worked on folklore without knowing the fact that they were working on folklore. And also, even not without knowing the language, we got an interpreter to interpret the text, but the visuality and the musicality, we were able to follow that easily, because music has a sort of a social epistemology with it. In terms of the ragas, in terms of the time that that a particular raga is sung, and there is an emotion that is associated with it. So these elements, which doesn't need a language, helped them do a different kind of research than than otherwise just a textual analysis. And all this paraphernalia of this theory methodology has been built only for the language, quote and unquote, a monolingual text. Okay, so at the construction level and sustenance level of folklore in South Asia, we can notice that not only scriptocentric, phonocentric, and the body-centric representations overlap with each other, but also the social epistemology gets fused into their representational formats. We can also posit multiple public spheres or publics for them, and corresponding social epistemology in terms of religion, caste, tribe, gender, sect, etc. As social epistemology being integral to the public, the study of folklore could include formalistic and social epistemologies. On the other hand, we can think of overlapping or telescopic systems of scriptocentric, phonocentric, and body-centric systems. Instead of excluding them, we can have a telescopic system. These overlapping systems need not have to be eliminating ones, as we noticed in the binary oppositional model. The logic of which induces the logic of endangerment and death of folklore, but could be perceived as coexisting systems, which feed into each other. Dense archives consisting of scriptocentric, phonocentric, and body-centric material need to be constructed. We are rich, our poems are still live, and that is the richest advantage that South Asia and Asia has. These archives are in vernacular languages and dialect, often only in oral format, and accompanied by music and visual components. As indigenous population, we are better equipped with multilingual proficiency to understand and interpret them. By using a comparative approach, and comparing a folk form with similar forms on the other hand, and with forms from other languages and dialects, provides us better insights. At the same time, data from other forms and languages might fill in the gaps that exist within the monolingual, monodialectal archive. That means a particular language, it might lose certain things. That can be filled here. Above all, I think we should also consider collaborative research, where each researcher is not an isolated watertight compartment. So the universities, the scholars, this is left to the supervisors. Many supervisors don't let their students even talk to other faculty. My department never had this problem. So these are some of the things that we need to do. All this might look like a ray of hope for folklore that is fast disappearing. But the happenings outside the field of folklore within the world systems I mentioned earlier have actually been detrimental to folklore. Let us look at iron and steel as a traditional artisan system. I'll finish it in next few minutes. Iron and steel as an artisan knowledge system. Iron Age is from 2000 BCE till the end of 18th century. The use of iron and the ecosystem that produced it was fairly stable, sustained, well sustained. Or charcoal for melting the iron ore and the consumption patterns of the both for weapons and for implements. Iron ore melts the problem is iron ore melts at a temperature of 1500 degrees centigrade. And to make 1 kg of iron, approximately 16 kg of charcoal is required. This requires 65 to 112 kgs of wood, depending upon the type of the tree. This work was done in connection with the Kannada epic, which I was trying to analyze. Contemporary scholars are trying to look at it as caste and various other things. The epic centers around a blacksmith community, and it is all full of miracles. So we cannot really read miracles. I was trying to read what happens in the 18th, 19th century when this epic emerged. So I'll briefly mention it. The ecological balance of iron production that had been maintained all over almost for 3.5 millennia appears to have been lost around 1750. I will take a specific case from Tipu Sultan's territory. This is the princely state of Mysore, Srirangapatna, and about 30-40 kilometers around that. That is where this tradition called the Manteswami epic tradition has survived today. Tipu and Hyder fought 4 wars between 1750 and 1799 with British, and increased the demand for iron for weapons and the rockets. Tipu appears to have given even incentive to the blacksmiths to produce more iron for the purposes of war. This resulted in the overburdening of the forest area, and the forest virtually disappeared. When the forest disappeared, iron production came to an end. This epic actually talks of that crisis. If there is no iron, and iron, the protagonist of the epic goes to beg for iron. That is let me bring in the details now. Bukhanin, around 1800, he is one who surveyed the region for East India Company after the fall of Tipu in 1799. Based on earlier reports, note that by 1750, forests in the vicinity of traditional iron producing centers had been deteriorated, but the iron production was still going on. By 1800, the forest had virtually disappeared and there was no production of iron. By 1835, after 35 years, Dept reports that the forest in the vicinity of iron production centers had been rejuvenated and the iron production was going on. By 1855, Dept again reports that the forests have depleted and the iron production had stopped. 1878 is the Forest Act introduced by the British government. We should understand this. Straining and sustenance levels of traditional iron production system by frequent wars and abnormal demands for wood. By 1870, The modern method of iron production started in India using the blast furnace. That's it can produce iron and steel much cheaper than the traditional mode of iron and steel production. The Forest Act brought by the British rule in 1978 had its main charge on the use of charcoal for iron smelting, because they are starting a modern iron smelting production, and to preserve the forest wood for the railway sleepers. European trade was able to trade iron and steel all over Asia without much of a competition because of the navigation. The depletion of traditional mode of production of iron not only took place in India, but also other places in India. So this is not just an Indian phenomenon or a phenomenon in the corner of Karnataka, present-day Karnataka. This was happening in the 18th century all over. And why did this happen? It happened because of the New World System. World systems and their circulations, whether material or ideas, have far-reaching consequences to local populations and cultures. Folklore, as an identity marker, whether it is ethnic, regional, or national, cannot stand against it. Hence, folklore needs to become intermediate, interdisciplinary, comparative, collaborative in its approach. Then only we can understand the reasons for such crises like the iron and steel. With a clear understanding of the reason for its crisis, we can think about its sustenance, preservation, and revival with having better equipped. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for such an igniting and inspiring inaugural speech. Listening to you live has always been such a pleasure to our heart. Thank you very much, sir. Now, Young Folklorist Conference 2025 has officially begun. We will delve deep into the world of folklore with the first special keynote session of today by Dr. A.V. Ajay Kumara, Secretary, Kerala Folklore Academy. Title of this session is Dynamics of Indian Folklore in Globalized Scenario, and this session will be chaired by Dr. Lakshmi Reddy, retired professor, NIFT, Hyderabad, Telangana. Handing over to Dr. Ajay Kumara and Dr. Reddy.
Namaskar and good morning to everybody. Welcome to the second International Young Folklorist Conference. I first of all thank Professor Joly Puthussery, Center for Folk Culture Studies, CFCS, University of Hyderabad, and CFSR for inviting me for this event. And I'm really thankful to be part of it, to introduce, that's my privilege, to introduce Dr. A.V. Ajay Kumar Garu, the esteemed Secretary of Kerala Folklore Academy, an institution dedicated to preserving and promoting the rich cultural heritage of Kerala. With a deep passion for traditional art forms and folklore,